You ever look at your own kids and feel like you don't even know them anymore? I did. And the day I buried their father while they were out laughing at some stupid party was the day something inside me broke. I'm Laura Williams, 58 years old. And last month, I buried the only man who ever really loved me. While my children, Emma and Ryan, decided to celebrate life. That's what they called it, by going out drinking with their friends. I didn't know then that I'd never look at them the same way again. The morning of the funeral. The sky was this cruel kind of blue. Too bright, too warm. The kind of day you're supposed to have a picnic, not lower a coffin into the ground. The church bells rang, people murmured their condolences. And all I could hear was the sound of dirt hitting wood. Michael's coffin. My husband. My partner for 34 years. The man who built our house with his bare hands, who never missed a single Christmas. Who stayed kind even when the cancer took his voice. But our kids, they were nowhere. No call, no text. Not even a message saying they were sorry, nothing. When the priest asked if I'd like to say a few words, I said yes. But my throat felt like it was full of glass. I stood there staring at that coffin and all I could think was, they don't even care. My children. Our children. The same ones we'd sacrificed everything for. I finished the service alone. And when I walked outside the church, I heard a car pull up behind me. For a second, I thought, maybe it's them. Maybe they came after all. But it wasn't. It was my neighbor, Carol. She got out, her phone still in her hand, her face pale. Laura, she said softly, I think you should see this. She showed me her phone. And there they were, Emma and Ryan, smiling, red plastic cups in hand, posing under neon lights with their friends. The caption said, "Life's too short to be sad." Posted 10 minutes before the funeral started. I swear, in that moment, I forgot how to breathe. It felt like someone had reached into my chest and ripped out whatever was left of my heart. People stared as I dropped the flowers I was holding. But I didn't care anymore. That night, I sat alone at the dining table, staring at two empty chairs. Michael's seat was still pushed slightly back, just the way he used to sit when he read the newspaper. His glasses still rested on the table, right next to the mug that said #1 Dad, and suddenly, that mug felt like the cruelest lie I'd ever seen. I spent hours replaying the last few months in my head, the excuses, the missed calls, the broken promises. Mom, work's been crazy. Mom, I'll visit next weekend. Next weekend never came. I'd been patient. I'd been understanding. I told myself they were just coping differently. But when I saw that post, I knew they didn't lose a father that day. They'd already lost their humanity. And maybe, just maybe, it was time they learned what loss really feels like. 2 days later, I got a call from Emma. Her voice was dripping with guilt, but not enough to sound sincere. Mom, I'm so sorry about the funeral. I couldn't handle it emotionally. Emotionally? I wanted to laugh. Instead, I kept my voice calm. I understand, honey. You were close to your dad. It must have been hard. There was a pause. Yeah, she said. It was. Listen, I continued. Can you and Ryan come by tomorrow? I need to talk to you both. It's about your father's will. Silence. Then, suddenly, interest. Wait, Dad left a will? She asked, voice suddenly sharper. Yes, I said slowly. And I think you should both hear what he wanted. The next evening, they showed up. Late, of course. Dressed like they were visiting a stranger, not their mother. Emma's eyes darted everywhere except at the family photos on the wall. Ryan looked bored before he even sat down. Thanks for coming, I said, forcing a smile. Sure, Mom, Ryan replied, sitting back. So, what's this about? I poured them coffee, just like old times. The smell of it filled the kitchen the same way it used to when Michael was alive. I could almost hear his voice, teasing me about burning the toast again. Then I set the cups down and folded my hands. Your father didn't leave a written will, I said. But he left instructions with me. About what he wanted. They both leaned forward. He told me, I continued, that everything should go to the one who stood by him till the very end. Emma frowned. You mean you? Yes, I said simply. Me. The silence was sharp. Ryan's jaw tightened. So that's it? You get everything? That's what your father wanted, I said calmly. He slammed his hand on the table. That's not fair. He'd want us taken care of too. I looked him right in the eye. He wanted you at his funeral. That shut him up. Emma looked down, her fingers trembling around the coffee cup. For a second, I thought maybe she'd apologize. Maybe she'd finally show some remorse. But she didn't. They left not long after, angry and offended, like I had betrayed them. As their car disappeared down the street, I felt something strange. Not sadness. Not even anger, just clarity. That night, I sat by the window, looking out at the empty driveway where Michael used to park his truck. The rain tapped softly against the glass. And for the first time in months, I felt calm. Because I finally knew what I had to do. They had chosen to mock their father's memory. To laugh when they should have mourned. But laughter fades fast, and regret lasts a lifetime. They thought they'd lost their dad. But they were about to lose something far more valuable, and this time, they wouldn't even see it coming. Asterisk, she woke up the next morning with the same calm she'd felt the night before. It wasn't peace. It was purpose. First things first, I needed facts. Not rumors. Not the cheap comfort of imagined justice. I wanted legal lines and paper trails, the kind that leave no room for second chances. So I called Claire. Claire arrived with her court bag and a look that said she'd seen 100 families fall apart. And a dozen women come back stronger. We sat at the kitchen table where Michael's worn placemat still lay. And Claire spread the papers across the wood like a battlefield map. There's the retirement account, the life insurance, the property deed, she said. Everything's in order. Michael made you primary on most of these. Her voice was quiet but steady. Legally, you're entitled to everything he named. Good. Legal cover was one thing. But I wanted the moment to sting. I wanted them to taste the consequences of their choice before the bank letters arrived. So I asked Claire something no one expects a grieving widow to ask. Can we make it public on our terms? Claire's mouth tightened. You mean, not a show, I said. Clean, undeniable. A process that makes them confront what they did without giving them a headline to exploit. I watched her nod. She understood the kind of leverage I wanted. Legal leverage. Social leverage. The kind that doesn't scream but makes everything else whisper. Next, I went through the house like a careful archaeologist. Every photograph, every voicemail, every little thing that tethered their lives to him. I found a showbox of old tapes in the attic, home videos of birthdays and bad haircuts. Of Michael teaching Ryan to throw and Emma to bake. I smiled at their young faces and felt a twist in my chest. Those memories were mine. For now, I called Carol and asked her to keep an ear out. Carol was retired from the school district and had a habit of noticing things other people missed. She promised, if they say anything out loud, I'll bring it back to you on a plate, she joked. I told her not to joke. Over the next week I watched quietly. Not stalking, observing. Emma posted a photo of herself at a brunch with a new boyfriend. Ryan tagged himself at a sports bar. Their lives were moving in some careless orbit while mine seemed to orbit a still point of betrayal. I scheduled small things in the house, appointments, repairs, yard cleanup, nothing flashy. Just enough movement for neighbors to notice the house was alive and being tended. The key was to make the house quietly official, not abandoned, not needy. Taken care of. Like a lighthouse with its light on. Then I started to sow small seeds of curiosity. I didn't post anything online. I didn't announce. But I made sure people close to them saw subtle shifts. The mailman used to wave when he dropped off the community newsletter. Now he lingered a moment, asked casually how I was doing. Carol mentioned to a mutual friend at the grocery store that I was planning to get everything sorted legally. That friend happened to be someone Emma followed on social media. The world is small. Small things travel fast. I met with the financial advisor Michael had trusted. I didn't need to be dramatic. I needed precision. We moved the retirement accounts into conservative instruments for the time being. I froze redundant credit cards linked to his accounts. Small, legal moves, all with Claire's nod. No one would notice immediately. But over time, the ripple would grow. At night, I practiced what I would say if face-to-face. Not shouting. Not pleading. Clear sentences. A rock-solid tone that doesn't beg but makes people account for what they did. I pictured Ryan's bored face, Emma's distracted laugh. I let those images harden me into something I could use, and because life is cruelly practical, I also started to prepare for the long game. I called a contractor and had him give me an estimate for fixing the porch. Oh, I don't want you to do it right away, I told him. Just give me a formal estimate. I need it for insurance. He nodded, handed me the paperwork and left. Another quiet paper trailed asterisk. 2 weeks in, Claire suggested a meeting with the bank. We can request a formal accounting, she said. It would force them to engage. If they want to contest anything, they'll have to show up. She smiled in that way lawyers do, the smile of someone showing you a chess move. That looks like kindness but is actually the beginning of the end. I liked that. I agreed, but I knew law alone wouldn't teach them. It would only reshape the edges. The real lesson had to touch their pride. So I started pulling at the threads of their pride. Emma loved recognition. She liked people to admire her posts and envy her brunches. I called Maria, a woman who runs a local charity Emma once donated to in a half-hearted Instagram post. Maria remembered. She remembered the way Emma volunteered once. How she'd been flattering in pictures but never at the actual food bank. I asked Maria to watch. She didn't ask why. People like to help. Maria later told me that she would reach out to Emma about a gala coming up. The plan wasn't to embarrass Emma at the gala, no. It was to plant an invitation that required attendance and public presence. One that would present Emma with a choice: show up in the town where her father was buried, and face the whispers, or decline and have people notice. For Ryan, I needed something that hit his ego. He worked in sales and cared about reputation. So I reached out to a co-worker of his, someone I knew through a PTA meeting years ago. I didn't explain much. I simply asked if he would keep an eye out for Ryan's behavior at work, whether it would be possible to mention that the family was handling things in a dignified way. Not a hit, just a nudge. No one had to be cruel. They just had to be curious. And curiosity is contagious. Days turned into weeks. My small moves were like the first dominoes in a long line. Each one was legal. Each one was quiet. Each one positioned me to take the next step with confidence. Then came the night my plan wanted to shift from cold logistics to something alive. I found an old voicemail on Michael's phone, hidden under months of medical alerts and appointment reminders. It was Michael laughing, telling a story about a fishing trip they'd all taken when the kids were young. He used a silly voice and made Emma giggle in the background. For a moment, I felt the worst kind of ache, the human ache of missing. And then, under that ache, there was a steelier feeling. I hit play again and recorded the snippet on my computer. Don't ask me why I recorded it. Maybe because I wanted proof of what they'd given up. Proof that my husband had been more than a paycheck. Proof that their laughter in the parking lot had not been just the noise of a good time, but a betrayal. I didn't know yet how I'd use that tiny audio. Maybe I wouldn't. Maybe it would become a private talisman. Something I would play when I needed reminding that what I was doing wasn't just for spite. It was for memory. The plan was no longer just about making them lose money or status. It was about making them look at themselves and not recognize who they'd become. And that thought was more terrifying and more powerful than anything else. By the end of the month, 2 letters were sent via certified mail, one to Emma, one to Ryan. Each letter was simple: a request for formal acknowledgement of their father's passing and an invitation to a meeting with the estate executor to review the accounts. Claire had drafted them. They looked official. They felt like the first real crack in their careless armor. I didn't sleep well that night. Anticipation has a way of keeping you awake. But I also felt something else, a small, private satisfaction. The kind that arrives when you know you've started a machine that will make people reckon. I knew this wasn't revenge in a Shakespearean sense. I wasn't setting fire to a house or cutting off limbs. I was setting into motion the things that would demand answers: paperwork, invitations, social nudges, public choices, and sometimes in the quiet before dawn, I allowed myself one small indulgence. I pressed the little recorded voicemail and listened to Michael's laugh, soft and ridiculous, and so alive. I let it remind me of why I was doing this. Not for money, not for power, for truth, because truth, if handled patiently, can be more devastating than the loudest scream. They would learn, I thought, sitting in the blue light of the kitchen, why respect and presence matter. They would learn that choices have a way of circling back, and when they did, I would be ready. She woke up that morning with the weight of small victories pressing at her ribs. Not loud victories, quiet ones. The kind that sit and marinate until people start to notice the taste of them. The certified letters did their work faster than I expected. Emma called first. Her voice was thin, careful. "Mom, did you send?" "Yes," I said. "Claire sent it. I thought it best you and Ryan knew what's happening." There was a rustle on the other end, like she was pulling on clothes or pacing. "We'll take care of it," she said. "We'll come by this weekend." "Good," I said. "Bring paperwork if you have it." We hung up. I didn't celebrate. I turned over the voicemail I'd recorded again, Michael's laugh in the background, and let it warm me for 10 seconds before I muted it and got dressed. When they arrived, the air was thick with an awkwardness none of us could name. Emma had on too much makeup. Ryan tried to look indifferent and failed. They sat across from me like strangers who'd been placed in the wrong pew. "So, what's next?" Ryan asked, flipping through the packet Claire had prepared and assuming any paper meant money. That was their instinct: money first, feelings nowhere. "Next," I said, "we go through what your father left. We acknowledge things. We decide, or you can contest. I won't stop you. But if you contest, you'll have to show up. In court, in public." Not an easy way to avoid choices. Emma's eyes flicked up. "Mom, we'd never." Her voice trailed. She wanted to say she'd done nothing wrong, but she'd already done wrong. The social media screenshot was a fact. She had no alibi. They left mad. They left wounded in the way spoiled children get wounded, hurt because consequences are sudden, rather than because of real loss. I watched the taillights fade and felt a strange mix of pity and cold approval. The first ripple I wanted came quicker than I'd planned. Word reached a mutual friend, one of those people who live in others' news feeds, and they mentioned the estate letters in a passive comment. That comment found its way into a thread. People I hadn't seen in years started to ask if the family was okay. Small threads of gossip started to spin. Emma responded like anyone who thinks image fixes everything, a carefully curated apology post. "I'm sorry I couldn't be there," she typed. It was hard, 2 paragraphs. 3 photos. A selfie at sunset with the exact filter she used to conceal anything raw. It landed poorly. People who'd known Michael's thumbprint of kindness on the neighborhood for decades volunteer. Bakers from school fundraisers, old fishing buddies did not react with pity. They reacted with bemused restraint. Some comments were blunt. "You missed his funeral," one said. Another, "Some things can't be benched for aesthetics." That was the first public blister. I didn't push it. I let it sit. Next came Ryan. His boss mentioned the family situation at a sales meeting in a way that made Ryan's colleagues suddenly look at him differently. A few clients started asking sensitive questions. In sales, perception is currency. Ryan's coin began to chip. I watched them both flounder under small social pressures. I watched their confidence crack. It didn't make me giddy. It made me patient. I wanted them to understand the architecture of consequence, the legal, the social, the moral. But the plan needed a hinge. A moment where truth and pride met and something had to give. I found that hinge in a place I hadn't expected: the old community center, where Michael had volunteered for years. The center was hosting a memorial luncheon for veterans. Michael's name was on the flyer because he'd shepherded the event for a decade. I called Sarah, who ran the center now. "We'd love to have you speak about Michael," she said, with the tired generosity of someone who knows how small towns hold themselves together. Perfect. I told Sarah I'd come. I didn't tell Emma or Ryan yet. On the day of the luncheon, I wore the jacket Michael had liked. It smelled faintly of his cologne. It felt like armor. The room filled with faces that had weathered time alongside ours. People lined up to say something gentle about him. Stories leaked out: funny things, clumsy things. The way he'd show up with a toolbox, laughter, tears, the kind of memory that knits people tighter. After the speeches, the organizer asked if anyone wanted to say a few words. I stood and walked to the podium. My hands were steady. I let the microphone take my voice and stretch it across the room. "Michael loved Saturdays," I said. "He loved coffee at dawn, fishing lines at noon, and people who stayed. He taught his kids how to bait a hook and how to be polite in public. He loved us with a steady hand." The room listened and the room remembered. I let the memory sit heavy and true. At the end, an elderly man I'd known for years, Tom, came up and hugged me. "Did you get a chance to tell Emma and Ryan?" he asked softly. "Yes," I said. "They know." Tom's brow creased. "They should be here." He said it like an observation, not like judgment. But the people around him were listening. And somewhere in the crowd, someone took out a phone. A short clip of my speech went up to the community group that afternoon. The comments were quick. "Where are his kids?" a few asked. "They should be here," others echoed. I didn't go hunting for the clip. I let it move on its own. When Emma saw it, she called. This time her voice cracked. "Mom, people are talking. I'm getting messages. You should," I said simply. People remember people by showing up. That's how they keep you human. "You have time to come to the service we're holding next week at the center. You can make it right." I meant it partly. There would be ways to make it right. But rightness in this life must be earned. Things escalated. A small piece of paper arrived from the bank, an administrative hold on a joint account Michael had for small bills. Clerks called to confirm signatures. The retirement funds I'd conservatively reallocated started the long process of transfer. Nothing illegal. Nothing dramatic. Everything by the book. But the cumulative effect was surgical. They began to call more often. Not to apologize. To negotiate tone. Emma texted pictures of herself at a volunteer shift, half-hearted, staged. "See, the image cried." I tried. Ryan texted that he'd been at a work conference. Both were smoke screens. They wanted proof of good intent, proof people accept without inspection. One night, Ryan showed up at my door unannounced. He looked smaller in person. The arrogance had been shaved down by weeks of whispers and awkward silences. He wanted his father's watch. "It's mine," he said, almost pleading. "Dad always said it would be mine." He reached toward the hallway where the watch hung in a glass case, with the rest of Michael's things. I let him have it. Not out of kindness. Out of clarity. I handed it to him and watched his fingers close around the metal. "You can have it," I said. "Just know this: having something doesn't mean you had the courage to be present when it mattered." He left with the watch, and for the first time, I saw the flash of regret cross his face. It was small and it might have been fleeting, but it was there. Late that night, I played Michael's laugh again. I let it fill the kitchen. I let it remind me that this was not about punishment alone. It was about memory, keeping a man alive in the ways that mattered. So those who had chosen differently might see what they'd lost. By the time chapter 3 closed, the town was talking. Not loudly. Not viciously. Just enough. Enough to make them look up from their phones and feel a prickle. Enough to make them think about who they really were when no one was looking. And the thing about prickle is that it makes people move. It makes them rethink. It makes choices sudden. I was ready for the next move. But I also knew, with the slow certainty of someone who's learned the smell of a storm, that the next move would require something harder than paper or public opinion. It would require a reckoning. Asterisk, the mornings were quiet now, almost too quiet. No phones ringing constantly, no texts begging for attention. Just the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the clock, and the memory of Michael lingering in every corner. It was peaceful but too peaceful. I knew the calm before the storm often carries the sharpest winds. Emma called first that day. Her voice trembled in a way I hadn't heard before. "Moms, can we meet?" I tilted my head, pretending casual curiosity. "Sure, where?" "The house," she said quickly. "We need to talk about everything." I smiled to myself, letting the smallest flicker of satisfaction pass through. The first cracks were forming. When they arrived, they were cautious, wary, and tired of the chase I had subtly orchestrated over the last few weeks. Emma avoided looking at me directly, fiddling with her phone while Ryan leaned against the wall, crossing his arms. Neither of them knew where the conversation would go, but I did. I poured coffee, just like I had in the past, and let the aroma fill the kitchen. "Familiar smells are comforting and sometimes deadly." "Sit," I said softly. "I want us to be honest today." "No games," Ryan scoffed. "What games?" "Mom, No," I interrupted. "No excuses. You laughed when your father was in the ground. You didn't even try to be there. That wasn't a mistake. That was choice." Emma's hands tightened around her cup. She didn't speak. I let the silence stretch, pressing the weight of my words into the room. "I've given you time to make things right," I continued. "And still, nothing." Ryan shifted, uncomfortable. "Mom, it was hard." "We're not. You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I said, leaning forward slightly. "I understand betrayal. I understand greed. And I understand cowardice when it's dressed up as fun." They flinched. Small movements, but telling. I could see they were beginning to realize I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to dismantle their sense of security quietly but completely. "Do you remember the retirement account forms?" I asked casually, flipping the folder open on the table. They froze, just enough to make my point. "Yes," Emma said softly. "You never checked them." I replied. "You never cared to know." "But I did. And because I did, you now know exactly what's yours and exactly what isn't." Ryan's jaw tightened. "You're not. You can't." "I can," I said calmly. "Legally, morally, emotionally. All of it." There was a pause. The air in the room was thick, almost tangible. I let them sit with it. "I've been patient," I said, keeping my voice low but firm. "I've let the social whispers work. I've let the small threads of reputation pull at you. I've let people see what you left behind." Emma's eyes flickered. You're doing all this on purpose?" I nodded slowly. "Of course. But here's the thing, it's not about me. It's about truth. And about you learning that choices have consequences even if you don't like them." Ryan stood abruptly. "This isn't fair. You're punishing us." I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of calm crush the panic in his voice. "No, I'm not punishing you. I'm showing you what it feels like to be absent. To miss something important. To realize, too late, that laughter and selfies cannot replace presence." Emma swallowed hard. "Mom, we're sorry." "Sorry isn't enough," I said softly. "It never was. But there's still a chance to make something right." Their heads lowered. I let the pause settle like winter frost. I decided it was time for the next layer of the plan, something that would sting on multiple levels. I reached for my phone and opened a folder I had quietly built over the past month. Pictures, videos, small personal notes, proof of their absence, of their priorities. Evidence that couldn't be denied. "You see these?" I asked, flipping through images of parties, posts, and social media activity. "All while your father lay in the hospital fighting. All while you weren't there." "I didn't make these, you did." "Every single one." Emma's eyes watered. Ryan's face went pale. They hadn't imagined it. They hadn't even tried to imagine it. "I've already taken steps to secure what belongs to your father," I continued. "Not because I'm cruel, but because I'm responsible. And I won't let what he worked for vanish because of negligence or because of your choices." Ryan opened his mouth, then closed it. Emma bit her lip, unable to speak. "Here's the thing," I said quietly. "The truth isn't something that can be undone. And now, it's about how you respond. You can choose to step up, or you can continue down the path you've already chosen. But know this, life has a way of making choices matter even when you think they don't." They stayed for another half hour, silently processing, glancing at the evidence, at me, at the quiet dignity in my stance. When they finally left, I sat in the empty house and let the tension dissolve. The air felt lighter. Not because I had won anything yet, but because the first real impact had landed. And I knew the next step had to be louder, sharper, but still controlled. I wasn't done. Not by a long shot, because revenge isn't about a single strike. It's about the slow unraveling, the careful positioning, and the quiet terror of anticipation. And by the time I was finished, they would understand, down to their bones, that laughter at the wrong moment leaves scars that no amount of money, parties, or excuses can ever erase. Asterisk. She watched them flail for a while. Not with rage, with calculation. The big moves were coming. The final phase. I had set the legal wheels in motion. I had nudged the town. I'd put small mirrors in front of their faces and watched them squint. But the endgame needed more than paperwork and whispers. It needed a choice. A hard, public choice. One that would force them to show who they really were. So I made one more call. Claire, I said. What would happen if I put conditions on any future distributions? She was quiet for a second. You can't deny them what they're legally owed without a will. Naming conditions, Laura. I understand that, I breathed in. But I can create a trust. I can set conditions. Reasonable ones, services, apologies, accountability, silence on the other end. Then you could. But it would have to be ironclad. Make it ironclad, I told her. Make it impossible to wiggle out of. But don't make it cruel. Make it meaningful. Claire took a long breath and then, with the kind of lawyerly detachment that's also a kind of sympathy, she said, we'll write terms that require public acts of responsibility. Community service at the center. A signed public apology at a memorial event. Attendance at family counseling sessions with documentation. Perfect, precise, measured. Angry but fair. I also arranged something else. I reached out to Sarah at the community center. We're organizing a remembrance exhibit for Michael, I told her. Photos, notes, the work he did. And a small reception for donors and volunteers. I said it casual. I didn't tell Emma or Ryan. I didn't have to. Seemed better that way. Then I wrote the terms into the trust documents. 6 months of documented community service at the center. A public apology at the exhibit event. Proof of participation in family counseling where they confront their absence and make amends. Only then would any discretionary funds be released to them. And even then, only a modest portion spread over time. The rest would go to the programs Michael loved, veterans, the community center. The scholarship fund he joked about setting up one day. When the letters went out, I watched the chessboard. Emma's world was built on a thin platform of influence. Ryan's world was built on deals. Both platforms were suddenly shaky. Emma panicked first. Not because she suddenly felt guilt. Because brands started asking questions. Her manager asked for clarity about her schedule. Sponsors pulled a tentative hold. The influencer community is a rumor mill. One bad story is like a drop of dye in clear water. The stain spreads. Ryan got less public heat, but sharper consequences. A client called him during a meeting and said, "Are you available next week? We heard about some family thing." The subtext was clear. Unreliable people lose contracts. In sales, reliability is currency. He began to lose value. They both called me separately, voices thin, urgent, surprised. "Mom, what is this?" Emma demanded. "Why would you do this?" "You don't have to," I cut her off. "I'm not doing this to be cruel. I'm making sure your father's legacy goes where he wanted it to. And I'm giving you a chance to be better. To be the people I hoped you'd be." She cried then. Not the dramatic sob of a remorseful child. The focused tears of someone watching her image dissolve in public. She begged for leniency. I told her the terms were fair. "You can earn it back," I said. "But you have to do the work." Ryan showed up at my house 2 nights later. He looked hollowed out. He said he'd lost a major client. He said people at work were talking. He wanted the watch back. He wanted the house sold. He wanted quick cash. He wanted certainty. I listened. I handed him a folder with the trust conditions printed on paper. "You can choose," I told him. "These are the terms. You can start tomorrow. Or you can walk away." He left, clutching the folder like a lifeline. I watched him go. For a moment I pitied him. Then I reminded myself why I started this. For Michael. For memory. For the small decency of being present. They showed up the next week. Begrudgingly at first. Then with a mechanical, half-hearted cadence. Emma came to volunteer at the food drive, sorting cans, lifting boxes, smiling for photos that she later tried to edit into the narrative of her journey. Ryan was awkward with the elderly at the center. He spilled coffee, apologized, tried too hard to be charming. But appearances have a way of changing things. Sometimes people begin with a fake smile and end up with a real one. I watched them move through the tasks, stiff and resentful. But then, on the 4th week, Emma stayed after everyone left. She sat in a quiet room and read through a stack of Michael's thank you notes I had placed, where she could find them. I caught her fingers trembling. I didn't interrupt. I let her touch the evidence of what she'd missed. Ryan, meanwhile, helped an old vet named Harold fix a leak in a wheelchair ramp. He grumbled, then cursed, then made a joke that made Harold laugh. For the first time since the funeral, I saw a flash of something unguarded in him, a willingness that wasn't staged for a camera. It wasn't instant change. It was tiny, incremental, but that's how real things shift. Not with fireworks. With small, stubborn heat. Emma's manager called, surprised. "She's showing up," he said. "She's actually helping. The posts are honest." People notice. Ryan's colleagues stopped teasing him in the break room. Someone said, "He's back." It was small praise. But it was praise. Then the day of the exhibit arrived. The community center was packed. People lined up to view Michael's life laid out in pictures and mementos. There was the old fishing hat, the worn-out leather jacket, the volunteer clipboard with his scribbled notes. And there were two sections I had deliberately placed at the center of the room. A wall of photographs from the hospital showing the quiet nights, the machines, Michael's hand wrapped in mine, and a digital slideshow looping side-by-side images on one side photos of Michael's last months. On the other side the screenshot of Emma and Ryan at the party, the red cups bright as neon. I'd debated whether to include that screenshot. It felt sharp. It felt necessary. The juxtaposition needed to be seen. The room murmured. Heads turned. Some people looked away. Some pursed their lips. Conversations buzzed low and then quieted. At the microphone I spoke. I told stories. I told small, true things about Michael that didn't require drama to matter. I kept my voice steady. I let the truth land like small stones in a pond. When it was time for the public apology, one of the trust conditions, I watched Emma and Ryan step forward. Emma's voice trembled. "I'm sorry," she said. "I wasn't there when I should have been. I'm sorry to my father. I'm sorry to my mother." The words were small but sincere. Ryan added his own apology, clumsy and human. People clapped. The room felt different. A notch changed somewhere. Not forgiveness. Not complete healing. But a beginning. Afterwards, outside the center, Emma hugged me. It was awkward. It was real. Ryan nodded, eyes redder than they had been in weeks. They had met the conditions. They had started the work. They had chosen to be present, not perfect. I left the center that night feeling the kind of exhaustion that follows a long, honest day. The ground seemed softer under my feet. Not victory exactly, but relief. They were learning. They were paying attention. And justice, if you can call it that, was not simply cruelty. It was accountability. But as I drove home, I kept one thought in my head. This wasn't over. Not for them. Not for me. There were still choices to make. Still a future to protect. Still a man's memory to honor. And I also knew, with a clear, steady certainty, that the hardest moment was coming next, the moment where they would have to choose between doing the right thing because someone watched, or because they finally could see themselves as someone worth being. Weeks passed, and the routine of consequences had settled into the kids' lives like a slow-burning reality they couldn't scroll past or ignore. Emma and Ryan were no longer strangers to the weight of choice. They were beginning to feel it in ways they had never imagined, small, sharp, inescapable reminders that actions matter. I watched quietly from the kitchen window as they arrived at the center one late afternoon. Together this time. Their steps were hesitant, awkward, but deliberate. Something had shifted. Not completely. Not perfectly. But something. I didn't greet them immediately. I stayed silent, letting the moment stretch. They shuffled in, carrying bags of donations, their faces flushed from exertion and embarrassment. I let them sweat through the work first. For nothing is more humbling than physical labor done in the shadow of moral reckoning. Then, when the last box was stacked and the center quieted down, I finally spoke. "Sit," I said softly. "I want to talk." They obeyed. Not eagerly. Not happily. But obediently. "You've done what I asked," I began. "You've volunteered. You've apologized. You've faced the town. You've faced yourselves." I let the words sink. And yet, this isn't about compliance. It's about understanding. It's about learning that absence, even brief, can leave wounds that linger longer than anyone expects. Emma looked down at her hands, fingers twisting nervously. Ryan rubbed the back of his neck. I could see the tension in their shoulders, the years of unearned confidence, slowly giving way to something like humility. "Do you understand what it means to really be present?" I asked. They didn't answer immediately. They had no scripts for this. No rehearsed lines, no excuse strong enough to erase the truth. They had only the heavy, undeniable presence of the life they had chosen to ignore. "You've learned," I said softly, "that your choices ripple. That laughter in the wrong moment doesn't disappear. That actions or inactions echo long after we think we've moved on." Ryan swallowed hard. "Moms, we get it," he said finally. We messed up. We really did, Emma nodded, tears welling in her eyes. We didn't realize. We didn't realize what he meant to everyone, to you. To all of us. I leaned back, letting a quiet, satisfied smile pass over my face. It's not about punishment. It's about memory. About respect. About making the people you love matter more than your convenience, your ego, your distractions. The room was silent. Only the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead filled the space. I had done what I set out to do. I had created a space where they had to confront truth, where they had to face the consequences of their absence, where they had to begin to understand loss not as an inconvenience, but as reality. Then I stood and walked to the display wall, the exhibit we had prepared in Michael's memory. Photos of him fishing, volunteering, laughing, living. The centerpiece, of course, remained the split screen of their father's final days and the party they had attended instead. I could see them looking, really looking, and I felt a small sense of triumph, not cruelty, but clarity. They were seeing the consequences of their choice, not filtered, not softened, real, unavoidable. Emma stepped closer, finally daring to touch one of the photos of Michael. He deserved better, she whispered. Yes, I said, he did. And now you understand that part of being a family is showing up even when it's hard. Ryan nodded. We'll never forget this, he said, and I believed him. Not because I trusted them blindly, but because they had been forced to face themselves. And the moment had stuck. I let them linger there, letting the lesson settle into their bones. The trust conditions were met. The restitution began, and slowly, over months, they started rebuilding, not the money, not the social standing, but the human connections they had almost lost forever. And I realized something about revenge. Real revenge isn't about cruelty. It's about teaching. About making people confront the truths they avoided. About forcing them to see the consequences of their choices. About leaving them with the memory of what they almost threw away. By the time they left the exhibit, shoulder to shoulder, faces solemn, I knew they had begun to carry a weight far heavier than the money or inheritance could ever teach them. They had begun to carry understanding, empathy, responsibility. I stepped outside into the cool evening air. The sun had just started to dip below the horizon, painting the sky with gold and orange. I took a deep breath, the kind that fills your lungs and clears your chest. For the first time in weeks, I felt calm. The storm had passed. My husband's memory was honored. And the children I loved, though flawed and broken, had begun to learn what it truly means to care. I whispered into the wind, almost to myself, almost to Michael, we did it. You didn't die in vain. They'll never forget you or what it means to truly be present. And in that moment, I knew some lessons are cruel, yes. Some lessons take time. But the ones that stick are the ones that touch the heart, that force reflection, that make people reckon with their own choices, and that at last was my revenge. Asterisk, do you think Laura's revenge was justified? Or do you think she went too far? Comment below and let me know what you would do in her place. And if you want more shocking, jaw-dropping stories just like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss the next twist in these real-life revenge tales.